Is making a marathon effort to boost his stakes in the crucial swing states. The US president has pulled an all-nighter campaigning in 6 states in just 24 hours. With less than 2 weeks to go before the election, polls show he's neck and neck with his Republican rival Mitt Romney. The Syrian government has confirmed it will abide by a 4-day ceasefire to coincide with the Muslim holiday of Eid. In a statement on state TV, the army says it reserves the right to retaliate against rebel attacks. Rebels have stepped up their campaign in Aleppo ahead of the ceasefire. They say they've advanced into several areas in the city centre. Let's take a quick look at finance, and markets were steady on Wall Street, or 26 points higher. There was little change in London, no change at all in London. The Australian dollar is buying 103 US cents. Tapis crude is trading at $112 US a barrel, and gold is worth $1,710 US an ounce.
Right across Australia this morning, disability rights advocates are calling on politicians from both sides to commit money to the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Morning teas are being held around the country to raise awareness of the issue. Mitch Fifield is the opposition spokesman for disability and carers, and he joins us now from Federation Square in Melbourne. Mitch Fifield, good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
Do you agree for a start that there is a lack of awareness or not enough awareness of what this scheme's about?
Look, we're having these morning teas around Australia today to raise the profile of disability. The fact that if you have a disability in Australia today, you actually get a pretty raw deal. If you need a wheelchair as an 11-year-old kid, you might have to wait a couple of years. If you're ageing parent carers looking after an intellectually impaired adult son or daughter, you've got no certainty as to what their accommodation arrangements will be when you move on. So we need to raise the profile of the issue. Australians with disability need a better deal. We're a first world country. We've got to do better.
Well, they'll get a better deal, won't they, from the National Disability Insurance Scheme?
Well, the National Disability Insurance Scheme, I think, is the answer. It's got support across the political spectrum, which is great. But the concern for me is that in the last budget, only a quarter of the money required for the first stage of the NDIS was allocated, and there was absolutely no provisioning for the NDIS beyond the launch sites, which are due to commence in the middle of next year. So there was no further light shed on that in the mini-budget on Monday, and I think Australians with disability are looking to the next budget for funding certainty for the NDIS.
But the government has said that the funding will come, just not necessarily, it wasn't necessarily in the mid-year budget handed down this week, but they are committed to it.
Well, I want to be an optimist, and I hope we see the provisioning for that in the next budget. But the last budget was cause for concern because, as I say, only a quarter of the money that the Productivity Commission said was necessary for the first phase of the NDIS was allocated. The government have yet to explain how they're going to make up that funding shortfall, and adding to the concern is $120 billion worth of unfunded commitments by this government, including dental, including and I just want to make sure that the National Disability Insurance Scheme isn't what loses out.
Yes, but at the same time, your colleague, Joe Hockey, the Shadow Treasurer, isn't committing a coalition government to funding the NDIS at all.
Well, Joe's been asking the perfectly reasonable question of the government as to how they are going to provision the NDIS. If there had been funding certainty in the last budget, we would have warmly welcomed that. And we want to see the NDIS happen. It's something that should be achievable by a government that's managing well and that's being a careful steward of taxpayer resources.
But can you understand why viewers, Mitch Fifield, can see a pretty big difference from what you're saying, a commitment to the NDIS, with what Joe Hockey is clearly saying, that he won't commit the coalition government, if it's elected, to funding the NDIS at all? He's very concerned about the cost involved.
Look, it's just not true. Joe is a big supporter of the NDIS. Joe supported.
It is true that he has said there won't be funding because he's concerned about the funding.
No, look, Joe supported the $1 billion that was in the last budget for the NDIS, and we hope that the current government do provide funding certainty, and if they do, we would certainly support that. The current government, the onus is on them to explain how they're going to make provision for the NDIS. We want them to do that, we want to see it happen, and the next budget is the opportunity for them to do that.
Mitch Fifield in Melbourne, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Michael.
The federal government is investigating British American Tobacco Australia over possible breaches to its plain packaging laws.
The first phase of the new rules came into effect at the start of this month, and as Latika Burke reports, the government is examining possible breaches uncovered by the ABC.
Australia led the world in introducing its plain packaging laws, forcing tobacco companies to sell their carcinogenic products in olive drab boxes, covered in graphic health warnings, stripped of all advertising and logos. In August, the tobacco industry lost its High Court challenge to the laws, and British American Tobacco Australia promised to comply with the rules once they applied. From October 1,